Police arrest black woman on plane, but turns out her dad owns the airline. The altercation began when flight attendants notified the authorities over what they claimed was a disturbance caused by the woman. As tensions escalated, the officers proceeded to arrest her, unaware of the surprising twist that would soon follow. The video captures the raw emotions of the passengers, some of whom voiced their concerns and disapproval over the handling of the incident. If you're excited about this story, please let us know. If you enjoyed the video, please press 1. If not, press 0. Your feedback has inspired me to collect more uplifting and meaningful stories.
Give him a free pass. The bustling airport terminal was filled with the usual pre-flight rush passengers hurrying to their gates, last-minute boarding calls echoing, and airport staff working diligently behind the scenes. Among the crowd, Dr. Amanda Williams, a prominent black billionaire entrepreneur wearing an elegant designer outfit, stood out, though her presence drew attention. She moved with quiet confidence, ignoring the curious glances. Amanda had just wrapped up a long business meeting before arriving at the airport. She was exhausted but determined to make it home. Her first-class seat was already secured, a privilege she had long earned through her success, but this time something felt different as she approached her gate. She was stopped by an airline employee who requested her boarding pass. "Ma'am, your seat isn't available. You'll need to move," the employee said firmly but apologetically. Amanda raised an eyebrow, surprised. She'd never had trouble with her reservations before. "What do you mean? My first-class seat is confirmed." "It's printed right on my ticket," Amanda replied, puzzled. The employee hesitated, casting a nervous glance over her shoulder. "I'm really sorry, but there's been a mix-up. Well, need you to sit elsewhere." Amanda, feeling her patience slip, managed to keep her cool and requested to speak to a supervisor. Soon, Captain Jack Turner, the tall white flight captain with neatly combed gray hair and a crisp uniform, arrived. Despite his professional appearance, he seemed irritated, his demeanor less than friendly. "What's going on here?" Amanda asked, calmly yet assertively. Captain Turner barely acknowledged her and replied, "You're in my first-class seat. You need to move." Confused, Amanda held up her boarding pass, insisting, "This is my reserved seat. I paid for it." Turner scoffed, sparing a glance at her ticket before shaking his head dismissively. "No, you're mistaken. That seat's taken." Amanda felt her heartbeat quicken, but she wasn't one to back down. "I've sat here countless times," she said, refusing to move. The captain's eyes grew cold, and his stance became rigid. "Ma'am, I don't have time for this. You're causing a scene. I don't care who you are, but you're going to leave this seat now, or I'll have you removed from the plane." Remaining calm yet unyielding, Amanda held her ground. "You can't just force me out of my seat because you feel like it. I'm not doing anything wrong." At this point, Captain Turner lost his temper. "Listen," he snapped, his voice raised. "I don't care if you're a CEO or a queen. Either you move, or I'll have you escorted off this flight. Your choice." His words, dripping with disdain, drew the attention of nearby passengers. Murmurs spread through the surrounding crowd as the tension thickened. Amanda could feel everyone's gaze on her. This was no longer just about the seat. It felt like a battle against a man who believed she didn't belong. Keeping her voice steady despite her clenched fists, she said, "I'm not going anywhere. You're not going to intimidate me into leaving." Captain Turner, visibly infuriated, stepped closer, declaring, "This is my plane, and I'll have you thrown off if necessary. I've had enough." Amanda stood her ground, unwavering. "You have no right to do that. I'm a paying passenger, and I'm entitled to sit in the seat I reserved. You can't treat me like this." But Captain Turner wasn't listening. In a sudden, aggressive motion, he shoved Amanda from her seat, his hand striking her shoulder with enough force to knock her backward. She gasped in shock as she stumbled to the floor. "Security!" Turner shouted over his shoulder as he stormed back toward the cockpit. The passengers fell silent, paralyzed by shock. Some looked on in horror, others whispered amongst themselves, but no one offered assistance. Amanda struggled to her feet, hands trembling from the adrenaline coursing through her. Her shoulder throbbed not just from physical pain, but from the emotional sting as well. After years of hard work and success, here she was, treated as though she didn't belong, denied a seat she had rightfully paid for. Just as she steadied herself, 2 airport security officers arrived, hurrying toward her. One, a woman, addressed her professionally, though Amanda sensed the tension beneath her words. "Ma'am, you'll need to exit the plane." Amanda's heart pounded. She realized she'd never experienced anything like this in all her years of success. Amanda wasn't sure which hurt more, the physical shove or the fact that nobody had stepped in to help her. "I'm not going anywhere," she stated, her voice cold but resolute. "I'm not the one at fault here." The security officer didn't argue, only radioed for backup, clearly wanting to avoid further conflict. Amanda knew this wasn't going to end well. A deep sense of humiliation burned in her chest, and the injustice weighed heavily on her shoulders as she was led off the plane. The whispers from other passengers grew louder. Some murmured sympathetic words, while others seemed to judge her race, her actions, her very worth. She couldn't hear it all, but she sensed enough to know that her blackness had made her a target for Captain Turner's fury. As the plane's doors closed behind her with a heavy final thud, Amanda found herself standing on the tarmac alone, feeling small and powerless. But something inside her stirred a deep-seated anger she'd kept at bay for too long, an anger that would now drive her forward. Watching the plane taxi down the runway, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her hand still trembling. The name on the screen made her pause. Her father, Charles Williams. As the CEO of one of the largest tech companies globally and a trailblazer for Black entrepreneurs, her father had fought long and hard for success. Amanda hesitated, knowing that if she answered, her father's protective instincts would kick in instantly. She couldn't help but wonder if this was the right move. This wasn't just about a seat on a plane. It was about a system skewed toward privilege. Finally, she hit the green button and lifted the phone to her ear. "Daddy, something happened," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "You need to hear this." As her words trailed off, Amanda glanced back at the plane, realizing that this was only the start of something much larger than she had ever anticipated. Sitting in the terminal, she tried to make sense of it all, her hands still slightly shaking as she gripped her phone. The humiliation was overwhelming. She had been treated with a level of disrespect that no one should endure, let alone someone who'd worked so hard to reach where she was. She had followed every protocol, observed her seat assignment, arrived early, and was ready for a smooth flight. But Captain Jack Turner had somehow decided she didn't belong. The way he had forced her off that plane with such disdain left a bitter taste in her mouth. It wasn't just about the seat. It was about being treated that way, simply because of her skin color. Her phone buzzed again, and the unknown number was instantly recognizable. It was her father's assistant. She'd missed their calls earlier, but now she couldn't ignore them. She needed to tell her father what had happened. With a shaky voice, she answered, "Hello?" The assistant's calm but urgent tone filled her ear. "Miss Williams, your father wants to speak with you. There's something important he needs you to know." Amanda glanced around at the airline staff, who were behaving as if nothing unusual had transpired. Moving to a quieter area, she whispered, "What is it? What happened?" After a pause, the assistant responded, "Mr. Williams has been informed about your incident at the airport. He's already on the line and is very upset." Amanda's stomach tightened. She knew her father well. His temper was controlled but could ignite in the face of injustice. He had dedicated his life to building an empire, including the airline that had just mistreated his daughter. She couldn't fully grasp his feelings, but she wasn't ready to speak with him yet. Charles Williams was a man who demanded results. And right now, Amanda wasn't sure what results she wanted. She hadn't fully absorbed the depth of what had happened. "Put him through," she said, trying to sound steadier than she felt. The line clicked, and her father's voice, calm but commanding as always, came through. "Amanda, what happened?" She took a deep breath, keeping her emotions in check. "Daddy, it's absurd. I was treated like I didn't belong on that plane. The captain, Captain Turner, he pushed me out of my seat in front of everyone." A pause lingered on the other end. Then her father's tone shifted, his usual calm intensifying. "Tell me everything. I need to know exactly what happened." Amanda recounted the entire ordeal, explaining how Captain Turner had approached her with an air of dismissal, ordering her to leave her first-class seat. When she stood her ground, he had physically shoved her to the floor. The humiliation, the shock on the faces of the other passengers, it was overwhelming. What unsettled Amanda the most was the silence from the other passengers. No one stepped up for her. No one demanded accountability, just the cold, quiet acceptance of what had happened. "Amanda, listen to me," her father said after a long pause. "You don't need to face this alone. I want you to gather your things and head to the nearest exit. I'll handle it from here." She could hear the anger simmering in her father's voice. Now, he was more than upset, he was livid. Charles Williams had spent his life fighting for black rights, equality, and justice. Though he'd achieved massive success, he had never forgotten his roots, or the importance of showing the world that he wasn't just another wealthy black man, he was a powerhouse. And now his daughter had been treated as though she didn't matter, a notion he couldn't accept. Amanda took a deep breath and nodded, even though her father couldn't see her. Okay, I'll stay in touch. Thanks, Daddy. Ending the call, Amanda gathered her belongings and walked slowly toward the airport exit. She couldn't shake what had just occurred. How could Captain Turner act that way toward her? How could anyone believe that treating her like that was acceptable? Was it because she was black, or was it because she was a woman? She didn't have all the answers, but she was beginning to see a larger pattern. This was not just a random act of disrespect. This was a symptom of something deeper, something systemic. Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, things were escalating quickly. The CEO, Jack Green, received a critical call from a staff member. Mr. Green, we just received a complaint involving a passenger, Dr. Amanda Williams. It's serious. Green's expression tightened. What happened? After a brief hesitation, the staff member explained, Captain Turner physically forced her from her seat. Green's eyes widened. Physically? What do you mean physically? As the staff member relayed the story, Green's stomach dropped. Amanda Williams, the daughter of one of the most powerful black billionaires, was involved. Hearing the full details made Green's heart sink. Amanda Williams wasn't just another passenger. She was the daughter of Charles Williams, a highly influential black billionaire. If this became public, it could ruin the airline's reputation. The image of a black woman being forcibly removed from her seat by a white captain in front of onlookers, a PR nightmare waiting to happen. We need to proceed very carefully, Green murmured, pacing in his office. Where's Turner now? He's still on the plane, the staff member replied, but we've pulled him aside. He doesn't know who the passenger was yet. Green rubbed his temples. Good. Let's keep it that way for now. Get him off that plane immediately. Contact PR. We need to start damage control. Meanwhile, still unaware of whom he'd insulted, Captain Turner returned to the cockpit, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. His mind was still clouded by frustration. Captain Turner had always taken pride in his authority. In his mind, he was simply doing his job, maintaining order on the plane. The passenger, to him, had been rude, disruptive, and out of place. He believed he'd done what was necessary. When the plane landed, the crew was ushered into a private room away from the passengers. Turner was approached by the airline's operations chief who, despite trying to remain calm, couldn't mask the tension in her voice. Captain Turner, she began, I need you to come with me. He looked at her, puzzled. What's going on? We need to discuss what happened with Dr. Amanda Williams. Please come with me immediately. Turner blinked in shock. Dr. Amanda Williams? The name meant nothing to him at first. He couldn't understand why this passenger would matter. He had simply followed protocol, doing what he thought was right. But as he walked down the narrow corridor toward the back office, he sensed an unusual tension in the air around him. The atmosphere in the room was charged. Everyone seemed on edge. This was clearly more than a passenger complaint. It was something bigger. Then when he heard the name Williams, realization struck, draining the color from his face. Captain Turner entered the office to find the CEO waiting. You have no idea who you've just tangled with. The words hit him like a sledgehammer. Amanda sat at her desk, her phone lighting her face in the dim office. She had always taken challenges head-on, preferring to address issues herself. But this was different. This wasn't just a misunderstanding with a rude passenger. This was personal. The disrespect, the humiliation, and the outright dismissal she had experienced on that plane weren't isolated incidents. They were part of something far deeper, woven into the airline industry and beyond. Hearing her father's name mentioned in the conversation with the airline's CEO shook Amanda to her core. She'd always kept a low profile, rarely drawing attention to her family's influence, preferring to be recognized for her own achievements. She had, after all, built a billion-dollar tech empire from the ground up, on her own. She didn't rely on anyone's help. But now it was clear that her father's reputation was something Captain Jack Turner hadn't factored in. Perhaps if he had known her background, he might have acted differently. Now, however, Amanda faced a choice. Taking a deep breath, she finally took her father's call. Daddy, she began, her voice calm but edged with frustration. Something happened on that plane today. I need you to listen. Charles Williams, one of the most powerful black businessmen in the world, listened quietly. Amanda could hear the familiar sound of his pen tapping against his desk, a sure sign he was processing everything. He had built his fortune from nothing, rising to the top with calm but unwavering determination. But when it came to his family, especially Amanda, his rules changed. "What happened, Amanda?" he asked, his voice steady, though concern was evident. Amanda hesitated briefly, then explained. "I was on a flight, and Captain Jack Turner, the lead pilot, told me to leave my seat. I had a confirmed first-class reservation, but he claimed it wasn't for me. When I refused, he shoved me out of my seat and called security." Her words hung in the air, filling the silence with tension. She could hear her father's breath slow and deepen as he absorbed her account. Finally, he spoke with a quiet fury. "He did what?" Charles asked, barely containing his anger. "And you didn't fight back?" Amanda's voice held steady with a hint of defiance. "No, I didn't. I just left the plane. But Dad, this isn't only about me. This is about everything wrong with how people like me are treated. Especially in spaces like this, it's about racism and disrespect." He looked at me and assumed I didn't belong. Charles leaned back in his chair, feeling the full weight of the situation. Racism was nothing new to him. He'd spent his life fighting against it, often using his influence to bring about change. But this was personal. His daughter had been publicly humiliated by someone who was supposed to lead with respect and authority. "Amanda," he finally said, his tone firm yet calm, "I'll handle this. Don't worry. I'll make sure he knows exactly who you are." Amanda felt a flicker of unease. Her father was powerful, yes, but she'd always tried to distance herself from that power. She'd worked hard to carve out her own identity, independent of his influence. Yet now it seemed that very power might be the only way to set things right. "I don't want to cause a scene, Dad," she said softly. "I just want to be treated like everyone else with respect." Charles replied, "I understand, but you don't have to accept that kind of treatment. No one should. This isn't about one rude captain. It's about a system that views black people as lesser. You will never have to deal with this again. I promise you that." Amanda felt a weight lift, but was also aware of the gravity of his words. Her father's promise wasn't just an assurance, it was a declaration. Once Charles Williams took action, the impact would be felt across the airline and beyond. For now, she was ready to let him take charge, needing time to process all that had happened. "Thanks, Dad," she said quietly. "Just make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Charles' voice softened. "You're my daughter, Amanda. I'll make sure it never happens again. You'll see." As the call ended, Amanda sat back, staring at her phone screen. She knew her father would handle everything, but her mind drifted to the broader problem. What about other passengers who had likely faced similar treatment? Those without a father like Charles Williams to fight for them? She couldn't just let it go. She was more than a victim. She was a force for change, just like her father. With resolve, she picked up her phone again, dialing her lawyer's number. If this was going to be more than a personal matter, she'd need to act fast. Meanwhile, across the city, Captain Jack Turner was seated at his desk in the cockpit, oblivious to the storm building outside his world. His day had followed its usual pattern of routine checks and paperwork. The incident with Amanda hadn't lingered in his mind. She was just another passenger who didn't know her place, he thought. Yet, as he scrolled through his emails, one subject line caught his attention. It was from the airline's CEO, a brief reminder to address the complaint from the challenging passenger earlier that day. Turner barely skimmed the email before dismissing it. In his mind, he'd already handled the issue. He wasn't interested in rehashing it, but he didn't realize that this complaint wasn't about to disappear quietly. The CEO, having spoken with Amanda's father, had already made calls to address the situation. This was no longer a case of one frustrated passenger. It had transformed into a full-blown PR crisis for the airline. If news got out about how a black billionaire had been treated as disposable, the consequences could be catastrophic. As Turner went about his day, he remained oblivious to the storm his actions had set in motion. Then a message arrived, summoning him to the CEO's office. "We need to discuss what happened today. You're in serious trouble." The morning air felt heavy as Amanda waited in the airport lounge, tapping her fingers nervously on the armrest. She hadn't received any official word from the airline, but a sense of change was in the air. What had happened on that plane was degrading and disturbing. Yet one thing was clear. Captain Turner had made a terrible mistake. Across town, Turner enjoyed his usual breakfast at a diner, unaware that his life was about to change forever. He sat with his newspaper, contemplating the day ahead. He had a flight to catch and couldn't stop thinking about the incident with the black woman, Amanda Williams, who had refused to give up her seat. In his mind, he'd just done his job maintaining order, but that confidence would soon be shaken. By now, the airline headquarters was buzzing with urgent activity. No one had anticipated this level of fallout. Amanda Williams wasn't just any passenger. She was the daughter of Charles Williams, one of the most successful black entrepreneurs in the country. As news of her experience spread, the airline's PR team scrambled to contain the damage. They'd already fielded multiple angry calls, yet they knew the worst was still ahead. In the conference room, the airline's PR lead, Susan Clark, a commanding woman in her 40s, addressed her team. "We need every detail of what happened on that plane," she said firmly. "This isn't just a customer service issue, it's a potential lawsuit. The last thing we need is a PR disaster." A young intern, Emily, tentatively spoke up. "I checked social media. It's trending. Justice for Amanda Williams is all over." Susan's expression hardened. The situation was now beyond customer relations. If Amanda Williams chose to take legal action, the airline could face severe financial losses. But even more concerning was that Amanda wasn't just another wealthy passenger. She was Charles Williams's daughter, a significant shareholder in the airline. Susan turned to her team. "Find out what happened on that plane. And Emily, get in touch with Charles Williams's office. We need a strategy before this gets out of hand." Meanwhile, Captain Turner was back at headquarters preparing for his next flight when his phone rang. Seeing his supervisor David Ross' name, he answered, unaware of the gravity of the call. "Captain Turner, we need to talk," Carl began, his tone serious. "You're going to need to come in for a meeting with HR and the management team. We've received some complaints." Carl's voice grew colder. "It's not looking that way from where we stand. We've got a formal complaint from Miss Williams, and the media is already on this story. Think about what you're going to say in this meeting." Turner felt a chill. He had dealt with difficult passengers before, but this was different. Amanda wasn't just another passenger. She was someone with serious connections. He had no idea who she was when he'd removed her from the seat. If he had, perhaps he would have acted differently. Now he was facing the fallout of his actions. As he headed to the airline's headquarters, Turner couldn't shake the sinking feeling that his career was at risk. He prided himself on professionalism, yet now everything felt like it was falling apart. Could he really lose his job over this? Could he be sued? One thing was clear. He'd made a powerful enemy, though he hadn't known it at the time. Meanwhile, Emily was still trying to reach Charles Williams' office, but the response was icy. When she finally reached his assistant, the message was clear. "Mr. Williams is handling this personally. If you wish to speak to him, you'll need to go through his legal team." Emily relayed this to Susan Clark, who instantly recognized the gravity of the situation. Charles Williams wasn't just wealthy. He wielded real power, and now the airline was about to feel the full force of it. Meanwhile, Amanda had been quietly gathering evidence. She documented everything that happened during her interaction with Captain Turner and had already reached out to her lawyer. The legal team was preparing to file a claim for racial discrimination and assault. Amanda wasn't one to let such matters slide. She had built her career and her family's legacy with resilience, and she wasn't about to let anyone diminish her, especially not because of her race. Meanwhile, Charles Williams was mobilizing his network. This was about more than a personal slight. It was about the larger issue of how people of color were treated in spaces dominated by white authority. This incident wasn't isolated. It was a reflection of a much broader problem Amanda had heard about, but was now experiencing firsthand. This wasn't just a rude passenger incident. It was a display of authority from someone who believed he could treat her as inferior, and now she was determined to make him regret it. As the investigation into Turner continued, tensions rose at the airline. HR was interviewing flight attendants and passengers from that flight, piecing together what had happened. Each new witness testimony painted a darker picture of Turner's behavior, describing him as aggressive and disrespectful from the start, using excessive force when he shoved Amanda from her seat. By day's end, the airline's legal team realized they had to act fast. They couldn't afford to let this continue, but it was already too late to contain the damage. The stakes had grown much higher than they'd anticipated. As Amanda's legal team prepared to proceed, Turner entered the airline's office, his career hanging by a thread. The morning after the story broke, Captain Turner sat in his cramped office staring at his phone, his hands trembling. Notifications flooded his screen, angry messages from family, colleagues, and strangers alike. He'd handled pressure before, but this was different. The entire world seemed to have turned against him. He told himself he'd done nothing wrong. After all, wasn't it her behavior that disrupted the flight? Amanda had insisted on sitting in a seat he believed wasn't hers. He was just doing his job, keeping order on the plane. But as the day wore on, a creeping doubt took hold. The words racial discrimination echoed in his mind. He'd heard that Amanda's father, Charles Williams, was now involved. What if this went beyond him and Amanda? What if it was about something much bigger? Something he hadn't understood. Then his phone rang. It was Megan Blake, the airline CEO. Her voice was tight with urgency.
Captain Turner, I need you in my office now. We're having an emergency meeting. He stood quickly, his stomach twisting in knots. Cold sweat clung to the back of his neck as he walked down the hall to the CEO's office. Inside, Megan was seated, looking paler than usual. "Sit down, Captain," she said, her voice lacking its usual authority. Turner obeyed, feeling a pit grow in his stomach. "We've received a complaint from Dr. Amanda Williams," Megan began, barely meeting his eyes. "You need to understand this isn't just another complaint. Do you even know who Amanda Williams is?" Turner frowned, confused. "No, I don't. She was a disruptive passenger. She wasn't following the rules." Megan sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose as though trying to compose herself. "Amanda Williams is not just any passenger. She is the daughter of Charles Williams, one of the wealthiest and most influential black businessmen in the world. He owns part of this airline," Megan said firmly. Turner felt his chest tighten as the words sank in. "What? She's his daughter?" he stammered. Megan nodded gravely. "Yes, and Charles Williams has already contacted our legal team. He's livid about what happened on that flight. Public outrage is escalating by the hour. You need to understand just how serious this is." Turner racked his mind, reeling. He'd heard of Charles Williams, a towering figure in the business world and an advocate for racial equality, but Amanda, he hadn't connected the dots. "I didn't know," he said, his voice rising defensively. "I didn't know she was his daughter. I was just doing my job." She was being disrespectful. Megan leaned forward, her voice cutting like a knife. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about her being disrespectful. This is about racial discrimination," Megan continued, her tone sharp. "Your actions on that plane were a textbook example of how the system marginalizes black people, especially when authority figures are involved. Amanda wasn't just treated unfairly. She was treated as though she didn't belong in that first-class seat because of her race. You can't brush this off." Turner opened his mouth to protest, but Megan silenced him with a sharp gesture. "Captain, we have a major problem. You're an experienced pilot, but you crossed a line that we can't defend. You've created a situation we can't control." She paused, her expression hardening. "Effective immediately. You're suspended pending a full investigation." Turner felt his face flush as the weight of her words hit him. "Suspended?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "This could ruin my career, my reputation, my entire life." His voice broke, the confidence he once carried now replaced by desperation. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he muttered weakly. Megan didn't flinch. "This isn't just about you, Captain," she said coldly. "It's about power, privilege, and the accountability that's been long overdue." Megan's tone grew even sharper. "The Williams family isn't going to let this go, and neither is the public. You've started something that could destroy this airline if we don't handle it correctly. Do you understand the gravity of this, Turner?" Turner nodded numbly, though his thoughts were a chaotic blur. Amanda Williams wasn't just another passenger. She was a symbol, and her father was one of the most powerful men in the world. Turner had no idea of the storm he'd walked into. Megan stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "We'll contact you with next steps. For now, stay out of the spotlight. The press is already circling." Turner left the office in a daze, his heart pounding as he walked the sterile hallways. The full weight of what had happened crashed down on him. This wasn't just a complaint. He'd made an enemy of a family that could ruin him. Meanwhile, Amanda was stepping into a new reality, one where she was no longer just a passenger, but the face of a movement against systemic racism. The media frenzy surrounding Amanda grew by the hour. She hadn't intended for her flight to spark such widespread outrage, but the public had latched onto her story. She was now a symbol of resilience, a woman who stood against injustice. Charles Williams, her father, had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with his legal and PR teams. His fury wasn't just about the humiliation Amanda endured. It was about how Captain Turner had dismissed her, a black woman, as though she didn't belong in the seat she had rightfully paid for. Charles had no intention of letting this slide. He was already preparing statements and planning legal action against the airline. Amanda, sitting in her father's office, tried to steady her emotions. "I can't believe this happened, Dad," she said, her voice tinged with anger. "I was just sitting in my seat. He didn't have the right to touch me. He didn't have the right to push me," she continued, her voice shaking. Charles reached for her hand, his tone soft, yet resolute. "I know, sweetheart, but you need to understand this isn't just about you. This is about every black person who's ever been treated like they didn't belong. This is about a system that allows people like Turner to think they can act this way without consequence. We're going to make sure that changes." Amanda nodded, absorbing her father's words. She understood the bigger picture, but the personal humiliation still stung. "It's so demeaning," she whispered. "I never wanted this kind of attention." Charles gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I know, but sometimes we don't have a choice. This isn't just a fight for you. It's for everyone who's ever faced this kind of injustice. We won't let it slide." Meanwhile, Captain Turner sat in his living room, staring at the news coverage of the incident. Every channel played the video of Amanda being shoved and removed from her seat. Social media exploded with hashtags like "Justice for Amanda" and "Shock to Racial Discrimination in the Skies." The public was outraged not just by the physical altercation, but by the audacity of the act. To the world, this wasn't just about one flight. It was about the broader mistreatment of black individuals in positions of privilege. Turner, still trying to justify his actions, muttered to himself, "I was just doing my job." She was out of line. But as the outrage continued to grow, even he began to realize that this wasn't something he could shrug off. Amanda, on the other hand, was channeling her anger into action, determined to ensure that no one else would endure what she had. With Charles' support, Amanda began strategizing her next steps. "This isn't just about me," she told her father. "This is about sending a message that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated." Her phone buzzed constantly with messages of support, but Amanda stayed focused on what mattered: accountability. She contacted her lawyer, gathered witness statements, and reviewed every detail of the incident. She wasn't just seeking justice for herself. She was fighting for every marginalized voice that had ever been silenced. Charles, ever the strategist, reminded her, "We need to approach this carefully. It's about more than just one captain or one airline. This is about a system that needs to be dismantled." Together, Amanda and Charles prepared for the next phase. The evidence they collected painted a damning picture of Captain Turner's actions and the airline's initial response. Amanda, with her father by her side, called a press conference. Standing in front of flashing cameras, she delivered a powerful statement. "What happened to me on that plane wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was racism, plain and simple," she declared, her voice unwavering. The room fell silent as her words resonated. "Captain Turner didn't see me as a person. He saw me as someone who didn't belong, and that's the problem we're here to address." Her words carried the weight of centuries of inequality, and the audience listened intently. After the press conference, the public response was overwhelming. Support poured in from around the world, with people rallying behind Amanda's call for accountability. The airline scrambled to manage the fallout, issuing public apologies and promising internal investigations. But Amanda wasn't satisfied with empty promises. "We need real change," she told her father, "not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been treated this way." Charles nodded, proud of his daughter's resolve. Together they planned their next move, knowing that this fight was far from over. Amanda wasn't just a victim, she was a force to be reckoned with, and she wouldn't rest until justice was served. As the story unfolded, Captain Turner faced the harsh reality of his actions. The video footage, witness testimonies, and public backlash painted an undeniable picture of his misconduct. The airline announced his suspension pending further investigation, and the world watched closely to see what consequences he would face. Meanwhile, Amanda continued to use her platform to advocate for systemic change. "This isn't just about me," she said in an interview. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through this." Her words inspired a movement, one that would push for greater accountability and equity in spaces of power. Amanda's fight was far from over, but she knew she wasn't alone. With her father's support and the backing of countless supporters, she was ready to challenge the system and create a better future for all. "Now I understand that some people might argue this was just a misunderstanding or that emotions ran high," Amanda continued, her voice steady. "But that doesn't erase the reality of what happened. I was singled out, mistreated, and removed from my seat in front of a plane full of passengers because of my race, and am here to say that this is not okay, not now, not ever." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "We have contacted the airline," she said firmly, "and we demand immediate action. Captain Turner must be held accountable for his actions, and the airline owes me and everyone who has faced similar treatment a public apology. This isn't just one man's mistake. It's part of a systemic issue in the airline industry that we cannot ignore. We will not stop until real change happens." As she stepped away from the podium, reporters bombarded her with questions, cameras flashing wildly, but Amanda said no more. She had delivered her message. It was now in the public's hands to decide what would come next. The fallout from her press conference was swift and severe. The airline's PR team scrambled to issue a statement, calling the incident regrettable and under investigation, but it was woefully inadequate. The public wasn't satisfied with vague apologies. They demanded action. They wanted Captain Turner held accountable and changes made to prevent such behavior in the future. Amanda, meanwhile, was far from finished. She had ignited a movement, and she wasn't about to let the momentum fade. When the court date arrived sooner than anticipated, Amanda stood at the center of a media storm. The coverage had only intensified in the weeks since the incident, with the public learning more about Turner, the airline, and Amanda herself. Support from her family, friends, and colleagues fortified her, but the real battle was just beginning. Standing outside the courthouse, her father, Charles, by her side, she took a deep breath. Every step they took was captured by cameras, every glance and word scrutinized. But Amanda wasn't thinking about the spectacle. She was focused on bringing the truth to light. Inside the courthouse, Captain Turner sat in the defendant's chair, his hands trembling as he fumbled with his notes. The once confident pilot was now a man on the verge of losing everything, suspended from his job, shrouded in scandal, and vilified in the press. Turner hoped for a quick resolution, but deep down he knew that wasn't coming. His career, reputation, and future were hanging by a thread, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this case was about far more than him. Across the aisle, Amanda adjusted her sleek black suit and took her seat. The tension in the air was palpable as whispers rippled through the room. Some voices sounded supportive, while others carried doubt or criticism. Amanda wasn't fazed. She was determined not to let anyone else define her narrative. With her sharp legal team, led by Lisa Morgan, at her side, Amanda was ready for the fight. Lisa gave her a reassuring nod. "We've got this, Amanda," she whispered. "This is just the start. We'll reveal the truth, no matter how difficult it gets." Amanda returned the nod, her focus unshaken. She was here not just for herself, but for everyone who had been wronged by systems of power and prejudice. When the judge, the esteemed Helen Carter, entered the courtroom, all fell silent. Judge Carter, known for her fairness and unwavering commitment to justice, called the session to order. Amanda's heart raced, but her resolve never wavered. Lisa opened the case with a powerful statement. "Your Honor, members of the court, my client, Amanda Williams, suffered blatant racial discrimination at the hands of Captain Jack Turner. On that day, despite having a valid first-class ticket, Miss Williams was forcibly removed from her seat and humiliated in front of passengers solely because Captain Turner decided she didn't belong. This was more than unprofessional conduct. It was a violation of her rights. As Lisa outlined the events, Amanda felt the weight of every gaze in the room. She stayed composed, her mind replaying the humiliating incident as her attorney detailed the injustice. Lisa pressed on, saying, "This was not just disrespect, it was targeted discrimination. Captain Turner didn't even know who Amanda Williams was, a tech entrepreneur, philanthropist, and daughter of Charles Williams, a man who had shattered countless barriers for black professionals. But even if she weren't any of those things, she still deserved to be treated with dignity and respect." At the mention of her father, the room shifted. The powerful dynamic between privilege, prejudice, and accountability became impossible to ignore. Turner's defense attorney, Richard Holt, rose, dismissing the claims as a misunderstanding. The captain acted within protocol, Holt argued. This was a case of a passenger refusing to comply with standard procedures, not a matter of race. Amanda's voice cut through Holt's words. "You don't get to call it a misunderstanding," she said, calm but firm. "You don't get to erase what this was. I was singled out because I'm black. My father built everything he has to ensure people like me don't have to face this kind of discrimination, and I refuse to let anyone, including you, dismiss that truth." The courtroom fell silent, Amanda's words reverberating with undeniable power. Holt hesitated but pressed on, claiming a lack of evidence for racial bias. Lisa quickly countered, "The surveillance footage and passenger testimonies speak volumes." "Your Honor," Captain Turner physically pushed Miss Williams from her seat, and his words and actions clearly demonstrate discriminatory intent. "This case isn't about a disagreement, it's about systemic prejudice and abuse of power." The courtroom's energy shifted again as Lisa underscored Amanda's story with facts and evidence. When the surveillance footage played, showing Turner forcefully removing Amanda, the room was gripped by tension. Amanda felt a mixture of vindication and pain as the images replayed her humiliation. She refused to look away, determined to own her truth. Charlie's calm, steady presence beside her was a constant source of strength. Meanwhile, Turner sat frozen, the reality of his actions sinking in as the evidence mounted. The witnesses corroborated Amanda's account, painting a clear picture of Turner's behavior and the systemic issues underpinning it. Judge Carter, her expression neutral but attentive, adjourned the court for the day, giving everyone time to digest the day's revelations. Outside, reporters swarmed Amanda and her father, but they remained composed, offering no comments. Back inside, Turner sat with his lawyer, panic beginning to seep into his expression. He had underestimated the gravity of his actions and now faced a storm he couldn't weather. Amanda, meanwhile, prepared for the next day, knowing the fight wasn't over, but feeling the tide turning in her favor. Her courage and conviction were undeniable, and the court and the world was watching closely as justice unfolded. The dynamic in the courtroom had shifted, and it was now evident who held the upper hand. Holt hesitated, visibly unsettled, before regaining his composure. "Your Honor, my client has a proven history of respecting all passengers, regardless of their background," he argued. "There's no evidence to suggest that race played any role in this incident. This is simply a personal dispute between two individuals." Amanda's lawyer wasn't about to let that assertion stand. "The evidence speaks for itself, Mr. Holt," Lisa countered, her voice steady but sharp. Surveillance footage clearly shows Captain Turner forcibly removing Miss Williams from her seat, and multiple passengers have testified to witnessing the incident. This isn't about a personal dispute. This is about power, privilege, and racial discrimination. The weight of her words lingered in the room. Judge Carter nodded thoughtfully before announcing, "We will resume with witness testimonies tomorrow. Court is adjourned for the day." As Amanda rose from her seat, she felt a small sense of victory. It wasn't over yet, but the truth was starting to come to light. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed Amanda and Charles, cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions. Amanda remained silent, her focus unshaken. She had said what needed to be said in court, and wasn't here to entertain the media frenzy. Charles looked at his daughter, pride gleaming in his eyes. "You did great today, Amanda," he said quietly. "But this is just the beginning. We keep fighting." Amanda nodded, her resolve hardening further. "I'm not stopping until everyone knows the truth," she replied firmly. The following morning, the tension in the courtroom was almost tangible. Witnesses began taking the stand, and each testimony chipped away at Turner's defense. Sitting in the defendant's chair, Turner's composure faltered. His confident demeanor from earlier days was now replaced with visible panic. He could see his case unraveling and feel the weight of the evidence mounting against him. Turner sat, pale and slumped in his chair, the once commanding presence of a pilot reduced to a man grappling with the inevitability of his downfall. The courtroom was heavy with anticipation as Amanda took the stand, calm but resolute. She recounted the events that had humiliated her and stripped her of dignity. "I didn't ask for special treatment," Amanda said, her voice steady and firm. "I only asked for respect. Instead, I was treated as though I didn't belong, as though my presence in that first-class seat was unacceptable because of my skin color." Her words resonated, echoing through the silent room. Turner couldn't meet her gaze as she spoke. The truth of her testimony was undeniable, her calm delivery amplifying its impact. Amanda's statement wasn't just about her, it was about everyone who had ever been subjected to such treatment. Charles Williams sat quietly by his daughter's side throughout the trial, his presence a steady reminder that Amanda was never alone in her fight. He knew the challenges of dismantling systemic injustices, but also understood the power of truth. The jury's deliberation was agonizingly long, the tension in the room mounting with each passing minute. Finally, the judge returned, and the courtroom fell silent. Adjusting his glasses, the judge addressed the room. After careful review of all evidence presented, he began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The jury has reached a verdict. We find Captain Jack Turner guilty of racial discrimination and assault." Amanda's breath caught in her chest as those words reverberated through the room. It was a victory not just for her, but for countless others who had faced similar injustices. She looked at her father, whose calm exterior belied the pride she could see in his eyes. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the judge continued, delivering the sentence, "Captain Jack Turner, you are hereby sentenced to 12 months in prison for your actions. Furthermore, the airline will face a civil lawsuit, and you will be permanently barred from employment in the aviation industry." Turner's face twisted in disbelief, his eyes darting to his lawyer for a lifeline that didn't exist. The murmurs turned to audible reactions. Some people cheered quietly, others whispered in disbelief. Turner's lawyer attempted to speak, but the judge silenced him with a firm hand. "This court will hear no further discussion," the judge said. Amanda felt an overwhelming sense of calm as the weight of the verdict settled over the room. It was over. She had fought back, and she had won. The system that had failed her in the past had finally worked. As she stood, she felt the eyes of the courtroom on her. But this time, they didn't weigh her down. She had stood up, spoken her truth, and found justice. Charles placed a hand on her shoulder. "We did it," he said softly. "But this isn't just about you. This is about everyone who has ever been silenced. Today, we've shown them that their voices matter." Amanda nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She wanted to speak, but words escaped her. Instead, she gave her father a small, grateful smile as they left the courtroom. Together, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and the world watched. Amanda's head was high, her eyes set on the future. This wasn't just about her, and it never had been. It was about showing that, no matter how deeply rooted injustice might be, it could be challenged and overcome. As Amanda and Charles navigated the crowd outside, Turner was escorted from the courthouse in handcuffs. His head hung low, his once proud shoulders slumped in defeat. Reporters trailed after him, asking questions he couldn't answer. Amanda didn't watch him go. She felt no sympathy for a man who had humiliated her and disregarded her humanity. He had seen her as less than, but now the world knew otherwise. As she and Charles stepped into their car, the doors closed with a soft thud, separating them from the chaos outside. Amanda gazed out the window, watching the courthouse fade into the distance. The magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. She had faced humiliation, discrimination, and public scrutiny, but she had come out stronger. "What's next, Dad?" she asked, her voice steady but contemplative. Charles smiled warmly. "We keep moving forward," he said. "We fight for the next person who needs help. We fight for justice. We fight for change." Amanda nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She had made a difference, but there was still work to be done. As the car moved through the city, she resolved to use her voice and platform to ensure no one else would have to endure what she had faced. The screen fades to black as the car drives off, leaving behind the courthouse and the crowd. The faint sound of the engine echoes, followed by a moment of silence that speaks louder than words. A message appears: "We celebrate stories that honor courage, resilience, and the pursuit of justice. Together, we stand against all forms of discrimination and inequality. Thank you for standing with us in the fight for inclusion and equality." The bravery that drives change. Dr. Amanda Williams, inspiring fight for justice. In a world that still grapples with the ugly remnants of systemic racism, stories like Dr. Amanda Williams are both heartbreaking and deeply inspiring. Her unjust removal from her first-class seat by Captain Jack Turner, driven purely by racial bias, is a stark reminder that progress is not always linear. However, what truly stands out in this story is how one woman's resilience and pursuit of justice rippled into a powerful movement for accountability, equity, and reform. Dr. Williams, a black billionaire, successful entrepreneur, and philanthropist, could have allowed this experience to embitter her or quietly moved on, as so many victims of discrimination often feel forced to do. Instead, she took a stand, not only for herself, but for everyone who has ever experienced the humiliation and pain of being judged unfairly because of the color of their skin. Her bravery turned a personal affront into a public reckoning. It's a shining example of how courage in the face of adversity can spark meaningful change. This isn't just a tale of injustice, but rather an opportunity to reflect on the incredible strides that can be made when individuals refuse to conform to silence. After Captain Jack Turner's reprehensible actions, Dr. Williams could have pursued a low-profile apology or quietly settled the matter out of court. Instead, she made the bold decision to hold him and the airline accountable, ensuring that the incident became a widespread discussion on systemic racism and corporate responsibility. Her courage inspired a groundswell of support from across the nation. This wasn't just about a single misguided pilot or an isolated incident. It represented an ingrained system of prejudice that must be dismantled. Pushing for legal action and ensuring a public trial wasn't just about her personal vindication. It was about creating a precedent, sending a clear message that racial bias, no matter where it manifests, will not go unchecked. What the world witnessed during this saga wasn't simply the condemnation of one man's actions, but a broader call for reflection and structural reform within industries that wield significant influence over people's lives. The airline faced not only legal consequences, but also overwhelming public scrutiny, forcing it to re-evaluate its policies, diversify its workforce, and demand greater accountability at all levels. Businesses, governments, and individuals alike were pushed to confront their own implicit biases and reflect on how systemic racism persists in even the most mundane aspects of everyday life. Perhaps the most inspiring part of this story is how Dr. Williams didn't stop at her victory in court. She continues to use her voice and platform to raise awareness, advocate for change, and transform a painful experience into an opportunity to uplift others. Her approach reminds us that even in moments of great injustice, there exists the possibility to channel pain into purpose. For the American audience, Dr. Williams' story is a powerful reminder of progress driven by the courage of individuals. It challenges us to listen, learn, and advocate for a world where every person is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race or economic status. While the fight against systemic racism is far from over, Dr. Amanda Williams' journey serves as a beacon of hope and a call to action, a reminder that through adversity, positive change is always possible. If this story resonated with you, let's continue this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share it with others.